You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Global Trade This Week. I'm Pete Mento, coming to you live from my bunker somewhere outside of all the problems and troubles in this world. And with me, as always, is the greatest co-host a co-host could ask to co-host with him, Mr. Doug Draper. Doug, how's it going, buddy?
Good. We're just going great. This is 4th of July weekend. We were just chit-chatting about stuff that we're going to do. So, it'll be exciting and classic Americana 4th of July for me up here in Steamboat. Small town, parade, block, Main Street, people throwing candy, kids running around. So, yeah, stepping back in time a little bit.
Well, before the show, I asked Keenan if he knew who Bauhaus was. He did not, but nor did you, Doug, which was a little surprising to me.
Yeah. Well, I did know what I said, what kind of music they play, and you named off like 4 or 5 bands that were like them that I knew. Yeah. So I know the genre. I just don't know that band.
In the 90s, I won tickets through a radio station for their big reunion tour. And it was right in the middle of the dot-com bubble when all the nerds were just super rich. And it was crazy to see a bunch of people in their 30s and 40s showing up. Like one lady got carried to the concert in a coffin. There's a lot of guys that had, fake glowing contacts, a lot of real weird stuff, Doug. But it was one of the more unusual band experiences of my life.
Nice. Good.
So I implore all of you to listen to Bela Lugosi's Dead. It's one of the better songs that came out of the 80s, in my opinion.
Wow. Well, unusual concert experience. If that's one of your all times, that says a lot.
And I've seen some stuff, Doug. I've seen some things I can't unsee at concerts. And yeah, this was pretty crazy. They started the show off by rolling a giant television out to the middle of the stage. And the lead singer, Peter Murphy, just sat there like singing like with an extreme close up in black and white, singing one of their songs. And we all lost our minds. Then the band all came out after that. It was a half art show, half music show. It's kind of who they were. They were like an artsy kind of band, but super cool band.
Huh. Interesting. All right.
Their version of Ziggy Stardust might be better than David Bowie's version.
I don't know about that. I don't really know how to comment on that.
I have to listen to it, buddy. But since I kicked off the show, that means that Doug's going to kick off the topic, and I think we're gonna take a shot at double time in this one because there's so much going on in this area.
Yeah, for sure. It's we talked a little bit about this last week. I think it was last week or maybe the week before with Forward Air's acquisition and how things aren't going that well and the stock price and all that kind of stuff. That theme continues this week with acquisitions or divestiture, if that's the right word there, Pete. The latest, what I'm specifically talking about, the latest is FedEx, right? So a couple things. They're shedding debt and starting to realign and become laser focused. So I'll explain what I mean by that here in a second. But the 2 examples I'm referring to, number one is they're getting rid of like half of their 757 fleet, right? So they're retiring aircraft, right? I think some of that had to do with the contract they lost with Uncle Sam and the Postal Service. But I also believe that that's just kind of right sizing. They've been talking and doing things towards that in the last really year to 18 months, and it's starting to pay off. But the one thing that's come out just in the last couple of days is, hey, maybe we want to spin off our LTL division, right? Hasn't been substantiated. There's been a lot of comments on it. A lot of talking heads like you and I are making comments on it, but it wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, UPS did that. FedEx has a big animal there of LTL when they acquired Overnight. A decade ago, maybe more. To be honest with you, I don't really. It was when I was younger, I'll tell you that. And now they're thinking about spinning that off and just being laser focused on their core competency, which all this is maybe like 2 years 18 months post COVID. But when the shit hits the fan and you really got to report to stockholders and make sure your business is profitable, man, you just start getting rid of stuff in the closet, and just getting rid of things that may have seemed interesting, may have been a roll of the dice back in the day. And now you're just like, let's get rid of all this stuff. When push comes to shove and we got to go in the bunker and hunker down, Let's do what our core competency is, which is small parcel delivery. Last comment on this, Pete, is that the aircraft, I mean, the 757 specifically is interesting. But if you look at what is UPS's core competency, the legacy business is ground. And if you look at FedEx, the legacy business is air freight. It's the other piece, the yin and the yang. So I don't know what to think of the aircraft and retiring all of those. Maybe it's just part of the fleet right sizing, so to speak. But anyway, that's my take on that one. You have a different spin on it. But before we get into your topic, what's your take? And have you heard about the rumors with FedEx maybe spinning off the LTL group?
Not until you sent it to me. So I did a little bit of a rabbit hole search on that. And the first thing, when you talk about these aircraft, I don't know enough to say, is it just time, like to retire the fleet? Is it a timing issue? I don't know if that had something to do with it. Or if they're utilizing different equipment. Maybe they're leasing different equipment outside of it to make up for the needs. But it's a volume business, bigger the aircraft, better the fuel efficiency, less you're going to be paying. So I've got to believe that has something to do with it. But this is a recurring theme with us, Doug, right? UPS and FedEx focusing on their core business and focusing on how their core business is such a monster and creating profit for them. So I have to think that some really smart people, I want to believe, Doug, like some super smart people were sitting around a conference table, doing Will Hunting math, figuring out what they have to do to cut this and squeeze this to get every penny out of a kilo. I don't want to believe that a business that big would do something unintentionally without spending a great deal of time thinking toward it. So that's kind of my initial thought. My secondary thought to this is we came out of COVID and everybody was making money. I mean, Doug, you and I could have started a freight forwarder and made more money than we know what to do with, right? But it's post that now. And yes, there's money to be made on ocean freight and air freight right now. Always is. But the truth is it's difficult to make money in a very volatile market. And these companies are looking at some of the investments that they've made and they're asking themselves, is it time for us to get out of what was a bad decision 2 years ago? So I think some of that has to do with this. And then there's companies that look at those possible corporations and say, is this something that we could add where there's technology, where there's particular routes? What is it about it that would strengthen us? We can get rid of the detritus. So I think this is it's going to be constant, Doug. I think there's going to be a lot of people looking to get rid of some companies that they were working with in order to, like you said, focus on what they do best. Mm-hmm. My topic this week has to do with DB Schenker. So, first and foremost, I know nothing before anyone asks me about what DSV is doing. I am so far down the totem pole I have no authority. I have no insights whatsoever. So don't ask me because I don't know. But everyone's speculating about who's going to buy DB Schenker. But today we found out that Maersk will not be one of those companies. So after, I guess, some soul searching and looking at numbers and the such, they decided there were smarter ways to use their money. I know that there are a couple of companies that are still in it, but you're talking about one of the largest freight forwarders in the world. And the volume that comes with that, the purchasing power that comes with it, this is not going to be your typical purchase. This is a pretty monstrous purchase. And the companies that it comes down to are going to have to be able to, I guess efficiently is the best way I'd look at it, bring these companies together. And DSV has a long track record of doing that. I think when you look at the size of the company you're talking about integrating, man, that's going to be a lot of work. I would love, Doug, and I've been saying this for a few years now, I want someone to make a poster of the big companies now and what they were before then. So, Radex was bought by AEI. AEI was bought by Danzis. Danzis was bought by DHL. DHL was bought by Deutsche Post. Like what it looked like back in the 80s and 90s when we started, and all the companies they were names, right? We knew who they were, Fritz and Tower and all those companies. And then, how small of a universe it is now. I think that some of these companies that were bought are just going to get spun off and bought by somebody else and just become part of that enormous, unruly animal that is international trade.
Yeah. Well, I was when you pulled this up, I'm like, why is Schenker even on the selling block, right? And their parent company, Schenker's a monster. Their parent companies, the premise was core competency, exactly what we were talking about with FedEx, right? And I didn't even realize Deutsche Bahn, BAHN. It's the largest railroad company in the world. right? And they're like, we're going to focus on rail and get that done. So a different spin on it, right? As far as Maersk saying, we're out, integration doesn't seem to jive, we're out. But then Deutsche Bahn is like, we need to become laser focused in our railroads. So we're seeing both sides of the equation on this one, and it'll be interesting to see how it spins out. I mean, at some point it's gonna happen. I think within a week. My take is that somebody's going to raise their hand. May not be a done deal, but they'll be a front runner, right? Deutsche Bahn's not going to screw around with this one. They got to get rid of some debt, and they got to realign. So I think it'll happen pretty quick.
And they want that money to focus on rebuilding infrastructure, and it's an expensive business. So this would certainly get them a lot of money to do that. We'll see, Doug. Like I said, I wish I had something that I don't know anything. They wouldn't tell me even if they could. I'm
Yeah.
I am utterly ignorant to what's going on.
Well, that's good. You got that precursor out there. So good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as we said, this is the week of our nation's birthday. So we're going to have a great halftime brought to you by Cap Logistics. Both of us have a little spin on the 4th of July. And so, I don't know, Pete, you want to go first? Why don't you go first?
Yes. So I spent not all that long ago. I've started reading a biography of each president. So I started with Washington and I moved my way through. And this really all started with a deep dive into the founding fathers and how bizarre they all were. I mean, I don't think more than a couple of them were over the age of 40. There were a few that were, I think one was 19, the fascinating people that put it all on the block. But then as I began to look at presidents, it got weirder, So on the 4th of July, President Washington had a list of around 200 things that a man should and shouldn't do. And he would share it with young people as like guides, like never pick your nose or scratch yourself amongst other people. Only drink your fill if you're around people you can trust. Never loan a family or friend money. Like they're commonsensical, but have them all in one place was fascinating. And then some of these other presidents like Harrison, who wanted to prove to the world he was a big tough guy. So when he wasn't at all. Like he was a pretty sickly person. He went out and gave his inauguration speech without a coat or hat on, and he died like a few weeks later from catching the flu. Andrew Johnson, not spoken enough about in my opinion, but he was born an indentured servant and became president of the United States. Jackson, that guy was a nutcase, right? So died with 18 bullets in his body, survived 118 duels. When you look at the founding fathers, Hancock, as an example, the guy was a gangster. Like legitimately, he was a gangster. He sold stolen goods. He ran blockades. He was bribing everybody. And he was apparently like the richest guy in the colonies. So for him, this was just as much about money as anything else. Quincy, right? John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams was a staunch Christian, abolitionist. And most people don't know this. He served as the defense attorney for the English military officers and enlisted men that fired on the Boston Massacre, and he won the case. He actually won it from British defendants. Benjamin Franklin, it didn't invent but discovered electricity. He was recreating an experiment by an earlier scientist, but he got credit for it because he did a better job of explaining it. And he put his own son in prison because he supported the British. You just go through all these names of all these people, man, and they get more and more interesting. And it helps you to understand how complicated and difficult the personalities were and how unlikely it is that this nation was formed in the first place. And it makes me proud, incredibly proud to see this diversity in thought, diversity in background, actually find a way to make things work.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know that on some of those things. I know that Harrison, like you said, I think his speech was really long as
Super
well.
long.
And then, that speaks to his character that you just made mention of. But
one person voted against what would eventually cause the Civil War, and that was Abraham Lincoln.
The great emancipator. Yeah, there we go.
The Ulysses, like Eisenhower, is a lot more interesting than people realize. And my personal favorite of all of them was Truman. He was the one president who never wanted to be president. He was VP, and they kind of gave it to him, and he sort of ran like a half-hearted campaign for re-election. He just wanted to go back to where was he from? Missouri, I guess, and go back to living his life. And because of that, he had the courage, because he didn't care, to make a lot of really hard decisions. There's a new movie coming out about Reagan. I'll be interested to see if it's just a pump-up job or if they get into the complications of his presidency. And I've been told that there's going to be a miniseries about Ford, about him taking the presidency. And, the guy was never elected. He's, I think, the only president who was never elected was Ford. He was appointed when Agnew got thrown out of being VP, and then Nixon took a walk, and now all of a sudden he's president. Yeah. One more thing I'll say, Doug, with all this talk about replacing Biden, Jimmy Carter's still alive. I think he's turning 100. He only won one term. He could run again. So maybe we can get old Jimmy out there.
Yeah, there you go. Good old Jimmy.
My favorite navigation teacher I was not his favorite student. He hated me, as a matter of fact. Bill McKinley was Jimmy Carter's roommate at the U.S. Naval Academy.
Oh, there you go.
I have nothing but wonderful things to say about him.
Interesting. Nice. Well, my theme is somewhat similar. I have a couple of fun facts, right? Couple things that the Declaration was actually started to be signed on July 2nd. Just the published papers to announce it didn't happen until July 4th. So there has been in the past saying, hey, well, July 2nd is really the independence. And all those signatures took like a month, right? It's not like everybody got together, all the 54 or some odd people that signed it. Took about a month. So it started July 2nd, not July 4th. It was just published as far as what they were doing 2 days later.
Doug, that famous painting is a lie? Where they're all standing around signing together? That's a lie? That kind of hurts, man.
Yeah, well, fiction and fact, history. So, that's what I have read and learned about recently. So, yeah, it took them, I think, 30 days or something to get it all done. But this one's pretty cool. So not that long ago, well, it's long ago for our kids, right? But for you and I, whenever, Alaska and Hawaii, that was like in the 50s, right? And so when those states came on board, there was this 16-year-old kid named Robert Heft, H-E-F-T, from Ohio. And his class was talking about, what does the new flag look like? Anyway, he had an idea, and he kind of put it together and ironed some things on. He spent like $3 or $4 on the material, and his teacher gave him a B- on the flag design. But he went ahead and sent it in to the U.S. government, to Washington, D.C., because they were asking for other ideas. They ended up selecting his idea, and then his grade was reversed to an A. But yeah, shocker, huh? So
that's cool.
I know, I didn't know that, and he's no longer with us. But it was some 16-year-old kid in Ohio. Pretty interesting. And I'm scrolling through here on a couple things. One, it said the average age was 45 years old of everybody that signed. Let's see, and then they just talked about fireworks and things like that. That's been a long-standing tradition. And here's the last bit I'll ask you. What do you think the population was of the United States whenever they signed the Declaration of Independence?
Doug, I don't know, maybe 500,000 people?
2.5 million.
Wow. Okay.
2.5 million when they signed it. But anyway, it's kind of cool. I'd encourage all of our listeners to go out and just, Google fun facts about our nation's birth, or 4th of July fun facts. It's kind of interesting. And I'm super glad I'm American, Pete. Love this country, greatest nation in the world, and I'm glad our listeners are here.
Facts.
To do that. But anyway, God bless America.
Doug, I got to give you two of my favorite I guess they're kind of 4th of July related. The first is Benjamin Franklin wanted the national bird to be a turkey.
I had heard that. Yeah.
He said it was more fitting, which I guess I should do a deep dive on that. And the second one is most of the founding fathers died penniless. A lot of them died, destitute for whatever reason. But in the report that I read, it was common. Like most businesses failed, and most business people failed along with it. So I shouldn't be surprised, I guess.
Nice.
Man, I couldn't agree with you more. I've been all over the world, and this is the greatest country, period. I would rather be here than anywhere. So
good. All
America. Yeah. Right. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's a comma America. You got to leave the A off, and then you got to have somebody with a fast food in one hand and a gun in the other, riding like a scooter or something.
Doug, you talked about how you're going to a small town 4th of July. I much prefer that to being in Boston or New York or wherever, and it just crowds everywhere, and it's just doesn't feel as soulful, doesn't feel as energetic and passionate as it does when you're in a small town. So
yeah. Well, next week I'll count the number of horses, because I hear there's going to be quite a few horses on this parade. So I will share with our listeners the number of horses that were in the Steamboat Springs, Colorado 4th of July parade.
Can't wait, Doug.
Yeah.
All right, pal, what's your next topic?
Oh, let's see. My next topic is Panama Canal related. And I know that we've talked about this a lot, but there is the conversation is, oh my God, there's no water. There's so many delays. Well, the rainy season has kicked in, and it's fixing itself to some degree, that the water levels are coming up, the wider berth ships are going through, and things to be kind of coming back to light. Or not back to light, but back to normalcy, to get the vessels through the Panama Canal. But it just amazes me that I don't think the average consumer, whether that's an American consumer or a European consumer or whatever, kind of understands the chaos that's going on around us, right? With all the ports and things that we've been talking about. And it will eventually roll into the pocketbooks, right? But the things that I've been reading about, and that you and I talk about, and that our listeners have a good understanding. But I think general consumers don't have a clue of what's going on. They may hear about the Red Sea because it makes the nightly news for 30 seconds, but they may not understand the link, the chain, if you will, between what's happening there and why their goods are not available. But I'm really excited that Mother Nature has helped the Panama Canal situation, and things should be improving. So I don't know. That's kind of my thing. Thanks. The weather has pivoted, and the Panama Canal issues are starting to get resolved.
Doug, I call people that don't work in our business normies, like normals, regular people. And I often joke in my seminars that your friends aren't sitting around a barbecue saying, man, these 301 tariffs are just kicking our ass right now. It's killing me. Or, your friends aren't saying, I went down to pick up some windshield wipers, and that Panama Canal is just wrecking my plans. And I'm sure that there are tons of industries that have something similar where they're impacting everything all over the world, but we don't talk about it. But they can't stop talking about it. Mm-hmm. But this particular one, man, the ocean rates are through the roof right now. And a big part of that is just, as you've been pointing out, we have an earlier peak. People are buying stuff earlier in order to avoid what they see as issues with tariffs, or they're taking advantage of things right now. And it's going to have a whiplash at some point where you're going to see a correction to that. But does the normal consumer feel it? Do they feel it? And I would love to have enough time to do an inflationary study to understand what the supply chain over the course of the past 5 years has meant to inflation, because it's meant a lot. It's meant a lot between disruptions to supply chains, inavailability of capital in order to invest in warehousing and infrastructure. The cost of transportation is massive. They always said if it was somewhere between 8 and 11% of the cost of goods sold, you're in good shape. There's no way you can tell me that over the course of the past 5 years, that was the average. I'm sure it was positive.
No way.
And then you know more about this than I do, Doug, but warehouse space is, in a lot of parts of the world, you can't find it. And if you do find it, you're paying a premium for it, and heaven help you if you need temperature control. So all that is just going to jack up prices. And in the end, it makes our T-shirts and our lunch meat and our, pens, pencils, and everything else more expensive.
Yeah. It's crazy. The one comment on the warehousing, because people would give me a hard time since I'm in that industry if I didn't make a comment, it's getting a little bit better. But I'll tell you, the one piece that is not is the temp control, right? And everybody, and being in California and being hot as hell in Fresno, it's a big deal. And there's just not a lot of options out there. But yeah, the warehouse thing's getting a little bit better. But it is, nobody's doing a whole lot of investments with the interest rates the way they are. There's projects that have been on the books that are completing up. But as far as new builds, new housing starts, for lack of a better term, are just not quite there. But anyway, what you got? Bring us home.
So I'm very concerned about the East Coast, and that starts with a possibility of a port strike. So if this port strike were to go through, if they were to go around everyone's expectations and actually shut down the port starting in September, that is going to push everything to the West Coast. Now, you were just talking about the Panama Canal, right? We're all sitting here rejoicing, jumping up and down, screaming, hallelujah, it's back open again. It's going to be pointless if these ships are not going through the Panama Canal to go to the East Coast because the ports are closed. So part of me is saying, great time for you guys to do some maintenance down there, I think, because your volumes are going to go through the floor. When I look at the way that the ocean carriers are treating the world, so East Coast rates are pretty damn high right now. And a lot of it has to do with the Red Sea. West Coast rates, because of volume spikes and capacity spikes, are starting to get a little bit creepy. And I spent a week last week in Salt Lake and in Minneapolis. I did a seminar that I was on sales calls for 3 days straight. Everyone had the same thing to say. We're feeling it in the transportation cost, and now we're feeling it in capacity. We're being told that our contract rates are not going to be honored, that will get you on a ship, but they're getting rolled because they got in at that market when it was crazy. Remember how soft the market was? They got the contract rates, and now they're being told by ocean carriers, listen, you can move on that contracted rate, but it's subject to availability. And right now, we don't have availability because people paying 5, 6, 8, 10 times what your contract price were. We're going to make sure that stuff rides because it's just more expensive to us. And then add in all of these blank sailings, man. They're blanking sailings, canceling sailings. They're creating a very good capacity crisis at a time when people are just shoving as much as they can to get over here. So, Doug, I've said it a dozen times. I'm going to say it again. Hate the game. Don't hate the player. These guys are in a position to make themselves financially, to have a windfall during this. We cannot like it all we want, but there's nothing stopping them from acting this way. And we learned nothing from COVID. We did nothing to prepare for this eventuality. And all these things happening at once, knowing that it was only a matter of time before it did again, Doug.
Yeah. Just the port situation out there. You're on the East Coast, right? I mean, I spoke earlier that LA's back earlier this year, and I think that rings true. But like you said, if the Panama Canal is open, doesn't make a bit of difference if the East Coast is shut. And it's not just New York, New Jersey. It's all along the entire coastline, all the way down. So it'll be interesting to see. LA is going to. LA is back, baby, and they're going to have a hell of a third and fourth quarter.
Indeed, my friend. I think don't forget Vancouver too, right?
Yeah.
They're going to have a great year as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. All the Canadian friends up there. Good call. So, well, that wraps it up on this holiday edition of Global Trade This Week. Pete, as always, appreciate you jumping on and being the yin to my yang, or yang to my yin, or I better stop saying those two words. And it's great. Thank you for listening to us and engaging. Always make comments whenever you see these posts out there. And hope everybody has a wonderful and safe 4th of July weekend. So, Pete, I think that's it, buddy.
Don't play with firecrackers, folks. Don't play with firecrackers.
Yeah,
All right,
exactly.
Thanks, buddy. See you next week.
We'll catch you guys next week. Take care.